I got Dexter Henry here with me because I don't know who else would be better on the subject because I've been around, you've been around. We both have freelanced at a million different places. We both have worked in this industry for a while, um, and together for about a decade at this point. But look, there's a lot going on that I think people would be interested in, Dex,
Mm.
about what's here, what's coming, the consumption of sports media content. Like there's just a lot here, and we're gonna try to squeeze it into like 30 something minutes. I say that all the time, and then it ends up being like 50. We'll try not to do that this time because I don't want to just have people just sitting here waste their time or potentially not get views because the video is too long. But Dex,
Yeah.
first thing here, you could answer this one of a couple different ways. I will accept it. What's the most interesting thing to either you or that you think the consumer should be aware of about sports media in 2025 in terms of content? Because we're in an interesting space. We can get into later on like fan content versus journalism. Should there be a versus there, whatever the case may be? But what's the main thing that has your attention about where the industry is at as this new year progresses?
So I know you asked for one, but I'm gonna give two because there's two things for me.
Totally acceptable.
And for me, the the two things are in terms of a content creation side, it's the increase in people who create content doing more live content. That's something
Mm.
you're seeing trend upwards. There seemed to be this talk, just even I could tell you short as 3 years ago, even at the place I work at the New York Post on the sports side, which was like, oh, okay, you got to keep this stuff shorter, right? Like it has to be short content, right? And you saw everything with TikTok, and not saying there is a definite insatiable appetite for short content. People are definitely consuming shorter content at higher rates than ever before. But what we have seen is like, yo, man, long content works too. People are coming, if that's coming back, and you're seeing that a lot with lives, you're seeing that a lot with shows like this that Brian's doing. People want some of those nuanced, longer discussions and shows. I mean, I do it with a couple shows that I do, right? So people will come for that. And then even the space is really interesting is like the time in the middle, right? Like that 8 to 15 minute range content.
Yeah.
That's being interestingly enough. I think there's been kind of avoiding that. Can you do content in that people find really compelling but digestible as well? So there's one thing for me that is like the length of content. How are people consuming the different lengths of content? And I think there was an idea of getting away from long form, but I think that's coming back in a way, and you're seeing that through different things like lives. The other thing for me is sports broadcasting and how these games are being divvied up. You look at the new NBA deal that'll be coming up at the end of this year, right? And all the spaces the NBA is going to be on. It's going to be on Amazon. It's going to be on Peacock, right? You look at the NFL. You saw the Christmas Day games on Netflix, even though the product was not good and everybody won't talk about it because it's NFL. But if it's the NBA has a problem with the product,
Right.
of course. makes no sense. People just keep telling on themselves about what they kind of don't like about the NBA, but that's a whole nother story for another day. I wonder if we're getting to this point, right, where the spaces to watch these games are getting too spaced out, right, and people are going to be like, "Yo, can I watch this here?" What about people who don't? I know this is going to sound weird to some people that I'm saying this, but what about the people who don't have Amazon Prime and can't watch these NBA games on a Thursday night? Only like 30% of the population has Amazon Prime. I think a lot of people think more people have it than do. Like I do. I've been an Amazon Prime subscriber for
Right.
years. I understand all that. I love Amazon Prime. Don't necessarily like some of the people around it, but you get my point with all this stuff. Is there accessibility issues for everybody? And are people getting priced out with all these streaming services? People have to make decisions. Do I want Peacock? Do I need Peacock? Maybe you'll get it if you're an NBA fan, but maybe you won't. Do you want Amazon? There's all these decisions you have to make. And what's the tipping point for all that when you spread your content out among all these different platforms? That's something I think that's something to watch for. Does the consumer really want it as spread out as it is now? I think in terms of streaming and being able to watch it in multiple places and being able to watch it on your phone is fantastic. But if you have so many places, people aren't trying to pay for all these different streaming services. At some point, there's going to be a tipping point. And how does that affect sports?
I think we're getting closer to that because every year shit goes up. Just that simple, right? Like this was a big part of what played into this last election. Now, you and I have thoughts on that that we won't turn this into an election episode. But a lot of people felt like they were voting the correct way, which we'll see about that in terms of like stopping inflation, so to speak. And with sports broadcasting rights, YouTube TV went up again. Netflix is always going up, and now they're making it harder for you to share passwords and shit like that. I think it's going to come into play because there are some people who, I mean, my father gets pissed when Met games are on Apple TV Plus because he doesn't have Apple TV Plus. And, you know, I got to go on website not to be named to send the link to watch because I don't have Apple TV Plus. And I'm making the calculation like I could afford all of them if I want. But if that's the case, like, why don't I just go back to doing cable? Like, as someone who, you know, I use YouTube TV, obviously, we both do. And we also use like Hulu and Max. And then once you get to a certain point in Netflix and Amazon Prime, it's like, all right, how much? Like, this is a lot. This is spread. And we're people who like could afford this stuff. But like, I mean, we're not rolling in fucking money either.
No, and I literally had a conversation with one of my boys the other day because I'm also, you know, you just mentioned it. I'm a YouTube TV subscriber. I've been using YouTube TV, I think, for 6-7 years now. I can't even recall what is going on. But I'm at the point now where I'm like, yo, is it worth it? Because I don't watch anything else on live TV outside of sports. So all I really need it for is ESPN or I guess TNT or some of the local stations for football that I'll watch for work. But I have ESPN Plus, so I could watch ESPN there if I wanted to, right?
That's another one. Disney Plus is another one.
Right. Disney Plus is one I have. I have a daughter. She gets used to the Disney Plus. I don't know.
I'm a boxing consumer, so like I have to have Disney Plus because of the Top Rank deal, which is actually supposed to be expiring this year. So we'll see if that's even going to continue.
But I'm starting to actually question, do I need YouTube TV? Right? Like, is it really worth the value of what I'm paying for? There might become a point where I could be like, I may not. I actually may not need it anymore. Right? Like outside for some like local stuff. Some of the local regional channels aren't even on there anymore. So what am I paying the $80? And here's the thing. What am I paying the $80 for? I love YouTube TV as a product. Like I've actually loved the service of it. I love the integration of League Pass into it. It is fantastic. The highlights they put for sports. YouTube TV is a fantastic product. But it's getting to the point where is it worth what I'm paying for what I actually watch and how much I do watch it? Kind of leaning to no. So yeah, there's a tipping point for everything, and I might cut that because the price is also getting close to what we were paying with cable. You cut the cord to save the money. I think truly what you're pushing towards in media is what people really want, but I don't know if it's going to happen because you still have these old cable companies hanging on. People want true a la carte media, but are we going to get that where you can pay for exactly what you want to watch? I think we're still a ways away from that, but it's what I think we're eventually headed to.
We've already heard reports about like a super streaming service where it's like the super league of streaming services where it's supposed to be ESPN, Fox, and I forget who else. But like, I feel like that's probably the next step where a couple of the big ones are just going to continue to link up and we're going to continue to have mergers, which also means we're going to continue to have mass layoffs for a lot of people who work. But like, this is what happened with Max where they had to deal with Paramount. HBO and Paramount, they merge, they create Max. A lot of people get laid off because, of course, that's what happens when mergers happen. And also, a lot of the content that people wanted from HBO Max is not even there anymore. Like, people keep talking about, like, oh, like Static Shock is not there, cartoons aren't there, and this has become like more than a sports discussion. But this is like sort of where we're at in terms of media consumption. And I think, you know, as you watch, like the NBA is going to be on Amazon now, and like baseball. And that regional product, in terms of like that regional deal, Bally's came and went. And now we have FanDuel, like Sports Network, which is a whole other thing because now you're bringing the gambling money into like the actual broadcast. And as somebody who profits off of gambling money, like I think that that's sort of wishy-washy. Like I don't really know what we're doing. Like I think people are just trying shit, which is.
I think people are trying shit. They're throwing it at the wall, but you're starting to see a lot of these networks kind of doing what the cable companies did right before. It's just changing over into that. Like they're looking to the mergers. the networks themselves are becoming the cable companies, but they're trying to figure out what people want and how you can bundle it together. You're gonna get people to pay for things that they need. Like, look, I'll explain this in this way. I'm a Peacock subscriber. I'm gonna be straight up honest with all of y'all.
Mm-hmm.
I don't watch really anything on Peacock other than Liverpool football. I'm a big Liverpool football fan. I have it for that. So when the games aren't on USA that I can watch them there. I've watched maybe like 2 other shows on Peacock. I've watched a couple seasons of Bel Air, and actually, they couldn't even tell you what else I've watched on Peacock. Now, Peacock will have the NBA. So now I got the NBA and I got the EPL on there. 2 leagues that I follow very closely.
And I have the WWE.
I forgot about that. They're getting WWE. But see, that's an interesting thing. Now you got NBA fans, you got EPL fans. I am not a WWE fan. You are. You're not an EPL fan. But if you got 2 of the 3 things there, you might be inclined to pay the $7.99. Just 3 years ago, I was paying $4.99 for Peacock to watch my Liverpool games. It's gone up $3 in 3 years. Mm-hmm. And am I going anywhere? No, because they're like, where else are you going to watch these Liverpool games? Well, I could tell you where else I could watch it, but I'm not going to say that here.
Yeah.
However, I understand what's happening. It's a little supply and demand. And can you bring the biggest groups of people together to your network or streaming platform to get them to watch? That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to cast a super wide net. Bringing in wrestling, I think, is going to be huge for Peacock, to be honest.
Yeah, and it's been there and it's doing well. And
yeah, I'm not a wrestling fan, but I understand what that's going to do.
Yeah.
Like think about it. They are great properties. You got the EPL, which if you're like me, it's one of the popular, biggest, if not the most popular soccer league in the world. Then you've got the NBA, the best basketball league in the world. And you've got pro wrestling. No matter how you feel about pro wrestling, that is a lot of eyeballs.
Yeah. And now they're going to have the Netflix deal, which has begun at the time that this is out. And I mean, that's going to add another layer to it. Okay, let's get to mine. The thing that I think is most fascinating here, which I think you'll speak to in a different way. The gap. I talked about this on something I did with, I think, our boy Gerard Hector, where we were talking about, like, all right, what's wrong with the NBA? It was also part of this series. Like, what's wrong with it, with air quotes, like what's actually wrong with it, or whatever the case may be, because a lot of people think that there's things wrong with it. And I think we have to hear people out, because there are a lot of people saying certain things, but that's neither here nor there. But I think in the NBA, in business in general, in this country, and in what we're talking about, the gap between the haves and have-nots from a financial standpoint has never been this dramatic, and you feel it in a lot of different ways. Mm-hmm. So I wonder, and we're pivoting to something different here, but in our industry, the same people are getting the big jobs over and over and over again, and it's making it very hard to sort of cut through, even though people feel like, hey, you can just do it, you can get famous on this, and then eventually you'll just boom. But I feel like we're at a weird time in our industry where it's the same people getting pushed, rotating to this network, to this network, to this network, to this network. And I feel like I'm not seeing as many people being developed by the networks and the outlets anymore, and whatever company they're at. I feel like I'm just seeing the same people over and over and over again. And I'm not seeing a ton of new talent be developed. Your thoughts on that are what?
Yeah, my thoughts on that are what I've seen through my career is that a lot of these spaces and networks don't really give a damn about developing new talent. Like, they care about getting the content out. There's not a lot of true guidance and mentorship at a lot of these networks and stations. And look, a lot of the fellow journalists the broadcast journalists like me or on-air talent will know exactly what I'm saying. I would ask all of them to be like, how many people have you had at your network or station that's really been able to mentor you and guide you and really develop you? That's few and far in between. The other thing is why that's a problem. You have an old model of local television, local network television, that especially at smaller markets, anyways, you get up, that doesn't really promote that either. Mm-hmm. And that model, the way people are watching and consuming media, is shifting. So now you got digital properties with people in there sometimes who don't really know about how to develop talent, or there's really no help to develop talent. There's really no on-air personalities to give back. I try to do that as much as I can. That's something I see is struggling with a lot of young people when I talk to them in this industry. They really are lost on the development. They really don't have anybody to talk to like look at their work, to be like, yo, this is what I could do better. I was fortunate to have some of those people, but like, you know, what's crazy is I'm saying that a lot of the people I had do that for me, I did not work with. That speaks volumes. A lot of my
Yeah.
mentors who've helped me in this way, I never worked with them.
Yeah.
I'm grateful for them. And I feel like a lot of the young people I help now too, I don't work with them. Now, to your other parts that you bring up, which absolutely is a problem, Brian, is the haves and the haves nots, the gap in opportunity and then also pay in broadcast media is stark. One, you got people trying to come in for entry level positions, even sometimes in big markets, and these companies not trying to pay people, lowball people. And it's crazy to me, like lowballing them with such low offers and not respecting the work. I'm not going to name this company, but I just had a conversation with somebody the other day about a position that was open at a company, and I saw it and it was presented to me, and I actually talked to my agent about it, and I would be interested in the position, except the pay is just way too low for my skill set and my time that I've put in this game. What I then found out from talking to somebody is this company with this pay range that I consider low for me, they are trying to get exclusivity. And I'm like,
Oh,
what?
so to clear up for people who may not
Yes.
understand what that means, you can't freelance.
No,
You
you
can't do
can't
your
do
own things on the
anything.
side. You
You
can't
can't
start
do
your own
anything anyplace
business.
else.
Nothing.
And my thing is that if you want that, you got to pay for that.
Right.
If you want that.
And
And
where seemingly everyone needs multiple streams of income to get by.
right. How dare you tell me I can be limited to that and not do this? But what I said to the person I was talking to, I said, well, you got to look at it this way. When you see a company put out a salary range in which they did in the market they're in, to let everybody know it's in the New York market, and then they're asking for exclusivity, what that tells me is they don't want someone with experience. They want somebody young and cheap. That's what they're telling you they want, right?
Exploitable is really the key
Yeah,
term there.
exploitable could be
Yeah.
that term. Because here's the thing: if the job in the company, I have no shade to them, but the job is a good one. And if I was out of college, I was 24, 25, and you know, somebody was willing to give me an opportunity and say to come and work that gig in New York, yeah, I'd do it. And be like, I'll only work for you because I'm trying to get my foot in the door. But if you're me who's been doing this for 20 years, which is unbelievable, I can't believe I'm saying that. You've been doing this for 20 years, you're like, yo, Doc, get out of here. You're
Yeah.
trying to cap my earning potential and my visibility.
Yeah.
I'm fine with signing things to be exclusive. You just got to pay for that.
Yeah.
At least for, I don't know, everybody can handle business, but that's, so you're seeing things like that. You're seeing the people at the top make so much money. It's hard to get in at the bottom, even in digital spaces, and people don't want to pay because I think there's also a lack of respect for the work that goes into the stuff. I think that's a whole nother story I can get into.
Especially when you get into a lot of the top earners, I'll probably say the vast majority of them are ex-athletes who are now
Oh
taking
man,
a lot of these positions, which open up another thing. And then if you're an average consumer, I think a lot of them would probably prefer to hear from ex-athletes as opposed to you and I.
we've got
Which I don't like. I'm not going to say they're wrong, but me personally, a lot of the ex-athlete content that we've seen is obviously very controlled. Like starting five is just, it's public relations, like all of these things,
yeah.
like essentially what it is. Like everyone's trying to put out the best versions of themselves, and athletes are doing the same thing. Whereas like people who are trained in broadcasting are not really inclined to play by the same rules. And it's just a matter of like, how are people conditioned what they want? Like I think about these things all the time.
You're right to think about them. I just think what that says, Brian, is there's been a devaluing of actual journalism, right?
Yeah.
Like this is not me hating on the athletes to get these opportunities, but I think the problem that I see with that is there's not enough balance. It's very formulaic. If you look at a lot of panels on these major networks, it's like, oh, insert host, and then which generally looks a certain kind of way. Then let's have a couple of athletes on there, and that's it. There's rarely, like there used to be, the reporter there to like sort of kind of balance it out, which I like. And I'm like, damn, could we get back to having the actual journalist there who might ask some like No shade to the athletes, because I know athletes who do really good stuff in this space.
Same.
I know, I've
Mhm.
talked to them.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like I know them, I've talked to them, I've seen them in places I work, and they're really talented. And usually they're guys who've and women who have taken the craft seriously. And there's a difference, but not everybody does. And I think a lot of spaces like, yo, let's just bring in an athlete and this will work. I've seen it with certain places where it's like, let's bring in an athlete, let's spend money on this or these podcasts or whatever, and then it does nothing. And it's like, yo, that was kind of shocking because you just thought because of the name or whatever they did at one time, this was going to work. And it's like, no, I think there's a tipping point for that too, Brian. But
I agree.
the other thing
1000%.
I think that's interesting is what you just said, the consumer's appetite for it. I think people are we're a celebrity obsessed culture in America. People are obsessed with celebrities in a way that I personally am not. But
Mhm.
people, I understand the vast majority of people are, and people want to know what celebrities are doing. They really don't know what they think. But I think there'll be a tipping point where people will be like, "Yo, but like, are they asking real questions? Where is the real journalism?" You're
I think
seeing
some people have gotten there, by the way. I do think some consumers have
I
gotten there.
I think so. I just get a little concerned when some of the things we've seen in the last couple of years, where especially like long form journalism, news magazine style journalism on the sports side has gone away.
Mm,
HBO
yeah.
Real Sports, which is my like one of my all time favorite shows, is now gone. And tremendous runs
BR
of them.
Mag,
Right,
Vice
we are
doesn't do
Mag
as
Vice
much.
Sports.
Yeah,
Those things I loved, and they really did in depth work, and I miss those things. I think they will pop up in other spaces. I
I
don't
agree.
believe that it's dead. I
I
don't
agree.
believe that
There's going to be too much of
there's
an
an
appetite
appetite
for it.
for it
Yeah,
because I think you can't go too far one way. We've gone too far in the athlete thing. We've gone too
I agree.
far.
You know
We've
what
gone too far.
the thing is too. You mentioned celebrity. I think we're also, I wouldn't say obsessed, but we do love documentaries as a culture, and
I love
I
documentaries.
think that's one of the spaces. But I think what people are beginning to see through is like when you see, what's that series on Netflix? But they did like the Johnny Manziel episode. They did the Florida Gators episode. The Gators one did not go over well. Untold. That's what it
Untold,
is.
untold. Yeah,
The
they did the
Florida
Malice
Gator.
at the Palace, right?
Yes, and the Florida Gators one seems like just an infomercial for Florida football and doesn't really get into the shit we want them to get into. Whereas some of the other things that they've done are actually really interesting and was also criticized because it's like, wait, are they just propping up Tim Donaghy? Like, what the hell is going on here? Because like Amin Al Hassan comes out after, accurately, in my opinion, goes like a lot of the shit he was saying is bullshit. And they just kind of let him do that, and I think he might have even said, like, this is what happens when you don't have people there to like ask real questions, so to speak.
He's
You
right
know,
though.
like
He's
that.
right. I thought one of the ones I thought that was on Netflix. Not that we're just targeting Netflix here because they're not alone in this, but
Right.
I thought the Sprint series was really good with the track and field. I thought that was really well done.
Mhm.
But I think the difference why that was good, Brian, was that track and field is a sport that almost they need to show that authenticity. So
Yeah.
there was nothing that could be fake there. And that's
Yeah.
it's very individualistic in terms of like single runners. There's nothing they could like do to do that. And I think in a way, because that sport needs more visibility, they were allowed to be like, okay, we're just going to leave this open. I think too many of the other sports, you talked about basketball and stuff like that, you're going to have a lot of athletes that are carrying like, oh, I got my image. I
They're
don't
gonna
want to
play it
show.
safe,
Yeah.
1000%.
And it's
Yeah.
like that's going to come through as inauthentic because one thing I do believe about this age that we're in media consumption with sports is people do want authenticity. I do believe
Yes.
that.
Yes.
So you can't fake it. If you're faking the authenticity, I think that's where it's going to be like, nah, we're not here for that. And
I think
I don't think that's going to fly.
I also think there's a growing resistance to, because I feel like the pendulum always kind of swings in different ways. And one of the things that's got me more optimistic is like I've discovered, like, yeah, there are some people, to your point earlier, that yes, they still want long form content, they still want actual journalism,
Mm-hmm.
because they want the reality that comes with doing the journalism. And some people also want, like, they don't want the short form content, or they don't want the hot take content, and they don't want people like, you scroll on your phone and you hear, just the same cliche shit that, no shade to influencers, but influencers often say, and you're like, oh, I don't want to hear this bullshit right now. You know what I mean? Like, I think the sensibilities are probably different from where they were when we were fresh out of the pandemic, and I feel like we were all like thinking a certain way. One thing I wanted to ask you though, going back to the point about like our industry specifically, hiring managers as it pertains to bringing in talent. Do you think, Because I feel like before I'd be like, all right, why aren't they like taking chances, hiring talent, whatever? And now I feel like they're in a tough spot because do you think they're not being imaginative because they're conditioned to think, hey, we're supposed to do this one way. We got to bring in the same people, rinse and repeat, X athlete, X athlete, X athlete, and we'll just get the host who is often looking a certain way, as you said. And, that's it. Or are they in a tough spot because there's constant turnover? And in order to quote unquote save their job from not being laid off every 2-3 years, because companies have layoffs every 2-3 years, do they have to play it safe? And thus new talent doesn't get developed in that way or invested into in that way.
To take the second part of that, I think there's a feeling that they have to play it safe, but you don't have to play it safe.
I agree.
You do have a choice in this, right? And I think that a lot of companies do play it safe because what I kind of watched this around some things I've worked in the last couple of years, where it's given me a lot more clarity on this. Like I've really seen this up close. So I'm gonna try to be careful what I say without like outing anybody here on this stuff. But older legacy media companies, traditional media companies, I think are more inclined to play it safe generally because a lot of the people and I'm not trying to be an ageist on this, a lot of the people that work there are older and look the same. So they're just trying to protect what they built instead of trying to do anything new, which is the wrong thing to do in media because media is always evolving and changing. So if you keep doing the same thing, you are going to die eventually. We are all going to die, but I mean this as a company in that sense is that you are not going to survive in this. The good companies that do this are the ones that are adaptable. And I think the companies that aren't adaptable are the ones that eventually die. Now, how does that relate to talent and what you're asking, Brian? The thing is that with talent, and you always talk about bringing in people in different opportunities. If you want to bring in people into different spaces, even if it's just as contributors, right? You can do this, but you got to want to do it. A lot of these places don't want to do it because a lot of hiring, like we know, is done about who you know, right? Which I'm not saying is necessarily a bad thing. People want to try to put on their people. But even with that, you got to try to break out the box. It's been proven that diversity is good for business. However, when all the people at the top look the same in these companies and there is no diversity, are they actually inclined to be that diverse? Generally, no. Because they're like, yo, everybody here looks like me and we're cool and we've been making money. Let's continue to make money. But that doesn't mean you're going to continue to make money, Brian. That's the thing.
What would you say to people who would push back on that notion? Because I would
go
not.
Into a newsroom.
No,
that's what I tell them. Go into a newsroom and prove to me that I'm wrong. That's what I would say to them.
There are people, because there are people, especially now post-election, who are like, get these DEI hires the fuck out of here. What would you say to people who think that way?
Yo, where is this happening? Right? I would ask anybody. There's data that comes out on this every year about how newsrooms across different sections of media are actually not diverse. Sports is one of the worst. It is terrible in sports.
Yes,
and I've worked in sports media for 20 years coming up soon. I've worked in it for 20 years, and it's not that much better than when I started. Okay? It is not much better. It's hard. And here's the thing. Don't tell me you see more black and brown faces on TV and anchoring and talent. Boo-hoo to that. Who's producing? Who's executive producing? Who's in the C-suite at these companies? They all look the same, and they generally are older white men. That shit hasn't changed because they're not letting people truly have a seat at the table. That's the problem. So people want to be DEI is only a problem for people who want to protect the way things are. That's what I'll say. That's the only those people think DEI is a problem because it doesn't benefit them and they want things to be the same way, which is old white men at the top, and think that, oh, well, we've been giving people breadcrumbs because you might see me on air or you on air. And it's like,
except you don't, because normally when you see the quote unquote diversity on air, it's former athletes of color.
Right. That's another problem into what we're talking about. Right. But if you want to, and I'm not the only person doing this. There's been other people like me who've been trying. Okay, I work on a show. I do this. I'm going to try to make sure I bring in different voices and different people that represent, we were in New York, the New York sports community and different things like that. If you
Who
want
also
to,
have, not to cut you off,
mm-hmm.
but like this is important. Who also, because some people hear that and they'll be like, "Oh, you're just trying to," and it's like, no, these people have resumes.
Yeah, no.
These people have legitimate backgrounds. These people have legitimate expertise. They have just been overlooked for one reason or
Yeah.
another.
I would encourage anybody. I do a weekly show called the New York Sports Rapid Rundown. I've done almost over 100 episodes of the show. It's going on 2 years in June. We've never had a repeat guest. I've done all the booking myself. Okay. All people of different backgrounds, some very prominent, some not so prominent, some people you maybe haven't heard of, but maybe you see them one time and you're like, oh, I like that person's take. They're really talented. They do this over here. It's not me intentionally trying to give people opportunities and being like, hey, let me make this a DEI initiative. No, I'm not making it a DEI initiative. I'm making it that I care about my content being diverse. And also, why the hell do y'all want to see and talk to the same people all the time? Like, that's that. Like, if people ask me why I do it, like, that's literally it. I don't want to talk to the same people all the time. I want to find new talent. I want to talk to new people. I want to show people who's coming next. There's some young journalists I brought on that I'm excited about and will continue to bring on, right? That I'm like, oh man, this person's young journalist, they coming up. Let me give them a seat at the table. But that's my thing, Bryan. You got to want to give somebody a seat at the table. Right. At many of these seats, especially in the C-suite level of these media companies, it's been the same people at the table for so long. I guarantee anybody, you look at the C-suite level at all these companies and you tell me how many black and brown people you see at them in these media companies, and then tell me where's the D&I initiative, because I don't see it.
Last thing before we get out of here. And if I'm getting this, I know you're getting this a lot. What the hell do you tell somebody who's trying to break into the industry right now?
Oh man. Yo.
Let's say like not from a sports commentary perspective, because I feel like what anyone would say the same thing, like just do social media, put your shit on YouTube, whatever. But if you're actually trying to pursue journalism, and this whole thing is not a journalism discussion, even though it kind of became like partially one. But if someone's trying to pursue journalism now, one, thank you for doing that, because that's going to be tough. But two, like what do you even tell them right now? This landscape.
The one thing I tell people is, like, if you're gonna do this, you better love it, because you're gonna be broke to start. Like, that's what I tell people first of all, because if you like, when I started 20 years ago, it's like I tell people all the time, if you can truly get past through the first 3 years and you just love it and you're willing to put in the work to get to any opportunity you think you can get, which is some advice Stephen A. gave me years ago. If you can do that, then I think you can really succeed in it. The other thing too is, like, I've told you this, Bryan. I told you this real early. Don't wait on companies to give you everything. Yes, and you have to be willing.
You have not seen me do that over coming up on 10 years.
You have to wait. You have to be willing to create your own opportunities and put yourself in the light and spaces you want to be in. The beauty of today in journalism that actually didn't truly exist at first when I started, existed about 5 years in, is that, you can do your own stuff and put it on YouTube and get it out there. I do encourage people to do that. Also, not just because you're thinking somebody will see you, because it'll get you reps. When you met me, which is over 10 years ago now, I had my thing, Backpack Broadcasting. I started that literally in hopes that I could cover stuff and people would see me and would get opportunities, because I wasn't getting the opportunities I thought I deserved. Now, that turned into a whole bunch of other things where I created opportunities for other people and platforms to help other people, which was beautiful. And I'm glad I was able to do that. But if I never did that, I tell people this all the time, that is the most important thing I did in my career.
Agree.
Hands down.
Yep.
It got me other opportunities that I wanted to do. It put me in lights for people to see me and say, oh, hey, his work is good. Whether it was Bob Windrum hiring me at Nets Daily, whether it was Pat O'Keefe hiring me at News 12, whether it was when I did my show, The NBA Exchange, which is just like this one, and talking to different people about basketball. I mean, that literally was pretty much kind of the job I do now with the New York Post, right, in digital content. So I've always used my platform to put myself in a position so that people could see my work, but also help other people. That's the thing I'm most proud of. You and I worked on a great thing together, La Cultura, a Puerto Rican boxing story that's won many awards, right? We did that together. And you were the correspondent on that. And it was like my pleasure to do that. And it's like, I think the thing I tell people is Try to create your own content, work hard, network, but also make sure you give back, because you got to help the next, especially if you're a person of color. It doesn't matter if you're a person of color or not, but if you're a person of color, you got to help, because there's, like I said, there's not many of us up in the C-suite. So you got to give back to the next generation that's coming on. It's bigger than you. It's bigger than me. I've had my mentors that gave me to put me in this position, and now I got to make sure the next generation is coming up and right. So I look out for my young journalists of color, but I tell them, it's like, network, stick together, build each other up, support each other. Everything's not a competition. You can get money together, and focus on building your brand and showcasing your work, because the advantage you have today, in my opinion, is you don't have to go seek the companies. They can come get you. They can come find you. They come see your work if you're doing it right and you're about the right things. And stay true to yourself. That'll be my last thing. Stay true to what's you. You don't have to be Mr. Hot Take Guy if you're not Mr. Hot Take Guy, girl. Be who you are. Be the person you want to be. Be the kind of content creator or journalist you want to be, and the rest will take care of yourself. That's it.
All that, and we're able to end optimistically. Dexter Henry, there we go, at DHenry TV on social media, also Blue Sky now. There's a social media portion of this that we could have gotten deeper into, but we don't want to run too long. Like, if you hear us talk about this on the phone, God, it'll be a 2-hour conversation, which, there may be a part 2, actually. Like,
part 2 is needed.
My YouTube channel, I can do whatever I want.